They found the first body behind the old train yard, face down in the dirt, gun still in his holster. Officer Kyle Jensen, 35 years old, father of 2, 6 commendations, shot point blank through the base of the skull. Execution style, the kind of hit that sends a message. The only clue left behind, a single black wedding ring, placed neatly on the back of his neck. By noon, the entire department was on edge. Cops don't get killed like this, not in quiet, coastal towns like Clearwater Bay. This wasn't just murder, it was personal, and it had just begun. So if you're watching this, stay until the end, because what started as a single killing would unravel into a story of betrayal, cover-ups, and one man's descent into vengeance. A man the system failed, a man they thought would stay quiet, but he didn't, and now, he's making them pay. 3 years earlier, Marcus Talley stood on the shoulder of Interstate 49, screaming for help. His wife, Yvette, was slumped in the passenger seat of their silver SUV, clutching her chest, gasping like a fish out of water. Marcus had dialed 911 3 times. The dispatcher's voice was calm, cold even, as she told him a unit was en route. But 20 minutes passed. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the endless thrum of highway traffic and Yvette's weakening breath. When the patrol finally arrived, it wasn't paramedics, it was 2 local cops. They didn't rush to help. They didn't check Yvette's pulse. They drew their guns. Step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them. Marcus froze. My wife is dying. Please, she needs help. The taller one, Officer Kyle Jensen, stepped forward, gun still raised. We got a call about a domestic disturbance. You matched the description. What? I called for an ambulance. She's not breathing, the other cop muttered, peering in through the passenger window. Marcus lunged toward the door. They tackled him to the ground. Yvette died slumped against the seatbelt, her eyes wide open, staring at nothing. The coroner's report later said she might have survived if someone had helped her sooner. Marcus filed a complaint. Internal Affairs investigated. The officers were cleared. No body cams had been activated. No accountability. Just a letter in the mail that read, after careful review, no wrongdoing has been found. Case closed. But for Marcus Talley, the case wasn't closed. It was just beginning. The second officer died in a house fire. At least, that's what the official report said. But the neighbors heard something different that night. 3 sharp cracks before the flames appeared. They didn't recognize the sounds until the next morning, when news broke. Officer Raymond Griggs was found dead in his bedroom, his badge melted into his chest. He had been shot in the face, then set ablaze. This time, there was no wedding ring left at the scene. Instead, written in black marker on the bathroom mirror, "Do you believe me now?" The department tried to spin it. Random attack, they said. No connection between Jensen and Griggs. But behind closed doors, the panic was setting in. The officers involved in Yvette Talley's death were being picked off, and the man they once dismissed as uncooperative was nowhere to be found. Marcus hadn't always been invisible. He used to run a small bookstore downtown, Talley's Pages, cozy spot with exposed brick and a back corner where Yvette held poetry readings every Thursday. She was the kind of woman who could make you believe the world still had magic. She made people feel seen. After she died, Marcus shuttered the shop, sold everything, moved out of town, but not before he paid a visit to the library. For months, no one noticed anything strange, until, in hindsight, it all made sense. Marcus had borrowed books on tactical planning, forensics, police response times, arson investigation. He checked out a memoir by a retired hitman under the name Jeremiah Harlan, then disappeared. The library card was never returned. The third cop, that one changed everything. Sergeant Denise Farlow wasn't on the scene the night Yvette died, but she was the officer who signed off on the internal review. She was the one who made the final call. No misconduct. They found her in her garage, engine still running, car filled with carbon monoxide. At first, they called it suicide, until someone noticed the car keys had been removed, and on the hood of her Prius, a photo had been duct taped. An image of Yvette Talley, sitting on the beach in a yellow sundress, laughing into the wind. 3 cops. 3 deaths. No suspects. But one common thread. The Clearwater PD went into full lockdown. Officers were pulled from the streets. Wives and children were sent out of town. The media whispered about a serial killer. The public started asking questions. But Marcus, he was silent, like a ghost with a grudge. There was a moment, just one, where this could have ended. Detective Owen Ramirez had just taken over the task force. Unlike the others, he remembered Marcus, not as a suspect, but as a husband, a human being. He pulled the 911 tapes, reviewed the GPS logs, interviewed the paramedics who were rerouted that night for a noise complaint. He started to piece it together. Why weren't the body cams turned on? He asked Chief Dorsey. Dorsey stiffened. They were undergoing maintenance. For 3 weeks. Drop it, Ramirez. But Ramirez didn't drop it. He filed a request to reopen Yvette's case. He never made it home that night. His car was found on the edge of a pier, door open, engine running. The only sign of him? A pair of handcuffs, twisted and broken, lying in the driver's seat. Inside the glove box, a note, scribbled in Marcus's handwriting. Justice delayed is justice denied. By now, Clearwater Bay was in chaos. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters holding candles and signs. Who protects us from the protectors? A leaked memo revealed what many had suspected. The internal review into Yvette's death had been manipulated. The officers involved had prior complaints. Body cam data had been wiped. Someone had covered it all up, and Marcus wasn't the only one watching. The city was holding its breath. 1 week later, Chief Dorsey vanished. No struggle. No break-in. Just gone. His office had been cleaned out. Drawers emptied. His nameplate left behind, sliced neatly in 2. That night, Clearwater's mayor issued a public statement. We are doing everything in our power to bring this individual to justice. But in the shadows, they knew the truth. Marcus wasn't just hunting cops. He was unraveling the system that let them walk free. So who was Marcus Talley now? He wasn't the grieving widower anymore. He was something else, something colder, sharper, like a scalpel slicing through scar tissue. Every move calculated, every death a verdict. But even vengeance has a cost. Because what Marcus didn't know was that he wasn't the only one looking for justice. There was someone else, someone who knew what happened that night on I-49, someone who had stayed silent, until now, and they were ready to speak. But not to the cops, to Marcus. 2 weeks after Chief Dorsey vanished, a package arrived at the Clearwater Bay Tribune. No return address, no fingerprints, just a brown padded envelope stuffed with photocopied documents, a thumb drive, and 1 black wedding ring. The note inside was short. Open this, and you'll understand why they deserve to die. MT. Inside the drive was a timeline, a sequence of files, dashcam footage, audio recordings, even internal memos that had supposedly been deleted. The package laid out the truth like a roadmap soaked in gasoline, just waiting for a spark. And that spark ignited the moment the Tribune published its headline. Clearwater PD covered up death of Yvette Talley. Evidence of widespread corruption surfaces. The internet exploded. National outlets picked up the story. Hashtags trended. Former Clearwater officers began to speak out. Quiet ones. Those who'd been pushed out, demoted, silenced. They confirmed what everyone feared. Marcus Talley was right. But that didn't mean the killings stopped. It was Detective Jamie Ladner who first connected the pattern no one else had seen. Every officer Marcus targeted wasn't just connected to Yvette's death. They had all benefited from it. Promotions, transfers, bonuses. It was like Yvette had been a pawn in some twisted game, and Marcus was playing it in reverse, taking each piece off the board one by one. But then he changed his pattern, and that's when things got personal. Officer Glenn Tran had nothing to do with Yvette's case. He wasn't even in Clearwater back then. He was young, new, clean. So when he turned up on a park bench with a bullet in his thigh, barely alive, everyone assumed it was a mistake, until Glenn woke up in hospital and said, "He spared me. He wants me to deliver a message." Marcus had tied Glenn to the bench. He'd sat with him calmly, like they were old friends. "You're not like them," he'd said, "but you wear the same badge. That makes you part of it." He handed Glenn a folded photo, Yvette's face, smiling. "Tell them I remember everything, and I'm not done." Then he left. No fingerprints. No trail. Like smoke. That act did something strange. It split the city in two. Half saw Marcus as a monster, a vigilante murderer, a terrorist. The other half, they called him a symbol. A man driven to justice in a world that offered none. They held vigils in front of Talley's pages, now boarded up. Flowers piled beneath the windows. Chalk messages scrawled across the sidewalk. Justice for Yvette. We believe Marcus. The badge doesn't absolve the crime. But someone else had been watching this unfold from the very beginning. Detective Kira Lund. She was the only one who had stayed on the original review board and refused to sign off. She'd been overruled, silenced, reassigned. But now she resurfaced because she had something no one else did. A confession. She came forward quietly without press. She sat in an empty courtroom, flanked by 2 federal agents, and slid a small voice recorder across the table. "It's all on here," she said. "The night Yvette died. What Dorsey ordered. What Ramirez found before he disappeared." The recording was damning. Chief Dorsey had issued a direct order. Delay paramedics. Wait for the situation to be controlled. He feared Marcus had a weapon. He didn't. But the call had been labeled domestic threat. Coded language for danger. And the officers had followed the script. Yvette had died as a test case. A demonstration of power. They never expected anyone to care. But they forgot who Marcus Talley was. They forgot the kind of man who doesn't mourn quietly. As Kira's statement made headlines, Clearwater PD began to crumble from the inside out. Several officers resigned. Lawsuits were filed. The Justice Department announced a full investigation. But the damage had already been done, because Marcus wasn't finished. He had one name left on his list. Elliot Price. The man no one mentioned. The name buried so deep in the files that only someone like Marcus could have found it. Price was a federal liaison. A fixer. He advised local departments on sensitive matters. It was Price who ordered the original report scrubbed, who greenlit the review board's ruling, who got Dorsey promoted, and most importantly, he was the one who told Ramirez to stand down 2 days before Ramirez disappeared. Marcus had been following Price for months, waiting, watching, planning, and on a Thursday morning, Marcus finally made his move. The press called it a siege. But there were no hostages, no standoff, no demands. Marcus walked into Price's office building dressed as a janitor, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and walked into Price's office with a gun in one hand and Yvette's ring in the other. Security footage showed the 2 men sitting across from each other for nearly 17 minutes. No shouting, no struggle, just a conversation. When Price's assistant finally entered the room, Marcus was gone, and Price was dead. Heart attack, induced by a paralytic agent found in his tea. The only object left behind, a photo of Yvette and Marcus on their wedding day, taped to the desk. On the back of the photo, in Marcus's handwriting, she was worth more than all of you combined. By now, the nation was obsessed. Netflix offered a documentary deal. Podcasters picked apart every minute of every killing. Reddit threads dubbed Marcus everything from the grieving ghost to the widowmaker. But Marcus didn't care. He wasn't after fame. He was after an ending, and he had one final stop. They found him 2 weeks later. Not in hiding, not armed, but sitting alone in Yvette's favorite cafe, reading her last book of poetry. The waitress recognized him, called it in. By the time SWAT arrived, Marcus was already on his knees, hands behind his head, whispering to no one, "Tell her I kept my promise." The trial was chaos. Protests outside, celebrities tweeting support, police unions demanding the death penalty. Marcus pled guilty to everything. He didn't fight it, but when the judge asked him if he had anything to say before sentencing, Marcus stood up, looked the court dead in the eye, and said, "I gave them every chance. I begged for help. They let her die. He paused. I just made sure they never forgot her name. The courtroom went silent, and then, unexpectedly, one of the jurors wept. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentenced to life without parole. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because a week after sentencing, a sealed envelope arrived at Clearwater's new police commissioner's office. Inside were 5 names. Not of officers, but civilians. People connected to the original cover-up. Civilians who profited, who buried evidence, who let the corruption spread. And at the bottom of the list, written in Marcus's handwriting, "You thought it ended with me." 3 days later, one of the names on that list, Harold Densmore, retired city councilman, was found dead in his garden shed. Cause of death unknown. No signs of forced entry. But pinned to his chest with a fountain pen was a sticky note. This is still justice. And here's the thing no one expected. Marcus was still in prison when it happened. Locked away. Monitored 24/7. Which meant he wasn't working alone. And as the camera pans out from Densmore's lifeless body, past the gathering sirens and horrified neighbors, we zoom in on a single figure standing across the street. A woman in a hoodie, face shadowed, hand clenched tightly around a folded piece of paper. She turns and disappears into the alley. The paper flutters slightly, revealing the edge of a wedding ring taped inside. The woman in the hoodie walked with purpose, her sneakers silent against the cracked pavement of the alley. She didn't look back. Not at the dead man. Not at the police tape unfurling across the street. Not at the squad cars screeching into position. She disappeared like a shadow swallowed by dusk. And just like that, the killings resumed. But this time, Marcus Talley was behind bars, which meant someone else had picked up the mission. And whoever she was just getting started. The media dubbed her the widow's hand. A ghost, a myth, a symbol. Theories ran wild. Some believed Marcus had recruited her before he turned himself in. Others said she was one of the silenced, someone with her own scars from Clearwater's rotten system. But the truth was far more intimate. Her name was Ayanna Pierce, and she had been watching for years. Ayanna had known Yvette Talley since they were 12. Church choir, high school, college roommates, maid of honor at Yvette and Marcus's wedding. She was family in every way except blood. But she hadn't spoken to Yvette in the weeks leading up to her death. A stupid fight. Something about politics. Ayanna couldn't even remember the details anymore. She just remembered the voicemail Yvette left. "Ayanna, I'm scared. I think someone's following Marcus. He got into it with a cop last week, and now he's acting like we're being watched. I don't know what to do. Please call me." She hadn't called back. Yvette died 2 days later, and Ayanna had never forgiven herself. When the story first broke, Marcus's trial, the leaked files, the murders, Ayanna had stayed silent, grieving, watching, rage simmering just beneath the surface. But when she saw that envelope delivered to the police commissioner's office, the one with the 5 names, and saw her name wasn't on it, something inside her cracked. Because Ayanna knew there were more. More names. More secrets. More blood that needed to be answered for. She'd been working in IT security for a private firm. She had access to tools most hackers could only dream of. The system that tried to erase Yvette had left fingerprints. It just took someone who knew where to look. And what Ayanna found chilled her to the core. There wasn't just one cover-up. There were dozens. Complaints erased. Footage scrubbed. Victims silenced. Yvette's case had been the tipping point, not the origin. Clearwater's corruption ran so deep, so wide, it had metastasized across the state. And several someones, had profited from it all. Contractors, prosecutors, real estate moguls who bought foreclosed homes after raids, bail bondsmen who funded political campaigns. A whole ecosystem built on abuse of power. And at the center of it all, a man named Stephen Vance. Vance had never worn a badge, but he didn't need to. He controlled them. Former state senator, current CEO of a security consultancy that trained police departments across the Southeast. Charming, unassuming, white-haired, and well-spoken. He made speeches about justice, donated to victims' funds, sat on reform committees. But Ayanna had the receipts, private emails, bribes, memos instructing departments on how to classify citizen deaths as accidental. Evidence that Vance had been consulting with Clearwater PD the very week Yvette Talley died. He wasn't just complicit. He was orchestrating it. And he was next. But Ayanna didn't want to kill him. Not yet. She wanted to expose him. Destroy his empire from the inside out. So she did something bold. She applied for a job. Under the name Nadia Kell, Ayanna was hired as a junior data analyst at Vance's firm, Halbert Solutions. 6 weeks in, she had access to internal servers. 8 weeks in, she was in the same elevator as Vance. 10 weeks in, she cloned his access badge. Every move she made, she logged. Every meeting, every file, every whisper in the hallway. And when she finally pulled the surveillance footage from the week of Yvette's death, doctored by Vance's team to erase response logs, she felt her fingers go numb. There was a recording. It showed Vance on a video call with Clearwater's chief. His voice was calm, measured, calculated. If he resists, treat it as a threat. Delay EMTs until the perimeter is secure. We don't need another PR disaster. Handle it quietly. That was it. Proof. Ayanna sent the clip to 5 independent journalists. 4 ignored it. 1 vanished. She knew what that meant. Vance had eyes everywhere. So she changed her approach. She went back to the list. 4 names remained. Each of them had played a role in suppressing the truth. 1 was a judge. 1 a tech officer who wiped evidence logs. 1 a city planner who rezoned poor neighborhoods after incidents. And the 4th, Ayanna's old boss. The one who hired her straight out of college. Who once called Yvette a fine girl but a bit too political. His name was Darren Keene. He died in his home office, slumped over a keyboard, a poisoned whiskey glass in his hand. On his monitor, a still image of Yvette's face. The message was clear. Ayanna wasn't asking anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus was watching the world burn from his cell. The guards thought he was broken, silent, unmoving, like a man swallowed by grief. But every now and then, he'd receive a letter. No return address. No name. Just 1 word, written in neat script. 1. Then a week later. 2. Then. Vance. He smiled once. Just once. And then whispered, Yvette, she came for you. Stephen Vance knew he was being hunted. But power makes people arrogant. He thought he could outmaneuver her. He set a trap. Announced a charity gala for police widows. Pure PR. Inviting mayors, chiefs, donors. He didn't know Ayanna had already infiltrated his security team. He didn't know she had copied his guest list, intercepted his comms, and rewired the surveillance feeds in the banquet hall. She watched him from the shadows that night. Watched him shake hands. Watched him lie. And then she stepped into the light. She wore a sleek black dress. No mask. No hoodie. Just poise. And fire. Vance froze. You, he whispered. I told you. This doesn't end with Marcus. She pulled a tablet from her purse, tapped a button. Every screen in the banquet hall flickered. Then played the video. His video. The one he thought was buried. His orders. His voice. The moment the entire room went still, Ayanna turned to him. You buried her. Now it's your turn. Vance lunged. She stepped aside. Security tackled him. His own team. Dozens of phones were already recording. And just like that, Stephen Vance fell. Not by poison. Not by bullets. But by truth. Ayanna disappeared again. Some said she fled the country. Others said she went underground, still working, still fighting. But the impact of her actions changed everything. Investigations reopened. Victims' families stepped forward. Marcus's sentence was appealed. And Yvette's name, it was spoken again. Not as a statistic, but as a martyr. A year later, Marcus stood before a parole board. He didn't beg. He didn't justify. He just said, I didn't want to become this. But no one else would stand for her. Now they do. That's enough for me. He was denied, but the board noted shifting public sentiment. And Ayanna, she sent one final message. A photo of Yvette's favorite beach. Flowers planted in the sand. A plaque that read, You were never invisible. You were the spark. But just when the city began to breathe again, a new envelope arrived at the Tribune. Inside, a list. 15 names. All new. No police. No politicians. This time, it was corporations, medical executives, land barons, lobbyists, and on the back of the list, one line in Ayana's handwriting: "Justice has no jurisdiction." The first to die was Leonard Clemens, CEO of Revion Therapeutics. On paper, he was clean, but Ayana had traced a trail of experimental testing to a small black community in Mississippi. Off-book trials. No consent. Dozens of sick children. 3 deaths. They'd buried the story. Buried the families. Until Ayana unearthed it. Clemens died in his penthouse, locked from the inside. No forced entry. No wounds. Just one thing on the desk. A vial of the same drug that had killed 7-year-old Devon Rucker. And next to it, a photograph of Devon's mother, crying in an empty courtroom, unheard. The media called it a coincidence. Then the second name on the list disappeared, and the third was found bound to a chair with their own shredded NDA stuffed into their mouth. This wasn't vengeance. It was exposure. Each hit came with files, dropped anonymously to journalists, leaked online, copied to government inboxes. Ayana didn't just remove her targets. She stripped them bare first. Marcus watched it all from prison, still serving life without parole. But something had shifted. He was no longer seen as a terrorist, no longer a threat. He was a harbinger, a prophet whose warnings had simply come too soon. And now, the state was under pressure to re-examine his case. When asked about Ayana, he smiled but said nothing. Only once did he speak to a reporter. "She's not following me," he said. "She's following the truth, and the truth doesn't stop." But Ayana wasn't working alone anymore. She had help now. And not just one person. An entire network built from victims, whistleblowers, former cops, ex-military, hackers, nurses, janitors. People who had seen too much and been ignored for too long. They called themselves the Blacklist. And Ayana, she was the match. But the flame was spreading fast. Enter Maya Barris, a rookie investigative journalist, hungry, brilliant, and reckless. She picked up the story after the 5th corporate death. While others feared getting too close, Maya chased a trail into the dark. She followed money through shell corporations, found gag orders filed under sealed courts. She even tracked a private jet from Atlanta to Colombia, carrying one of the names on the list, fleeing just days before their scheduled exposure. Her article, titled "The Shadow Doctrine: How Corporations Weaponize Silence," went viral in less than 12 hours. And that night, Ayana left her a message. No voice. No return address. Just a flash drive duct-taped under her windshield wiper. Inside, the next 3 names. And a message typed in a plain text file. They paid to bury bodies. You have the shovel. Dig. But as the operation expanded, so did the danger. The 7th person on the list wasn't exposed. They were protected. Howard Ridgway, former congressman turned defense contractor, wasn't just dirty. He was insulated. He had ties to federal surveillance programs, intelligence clearance, private security, mercenaries. When Ayana moved against him, something went wrong. The file leak was intercepted. The whistleblower she trusted turned up dead. And Ayana, she was wounded for the first time. Caught in a car chase, cornered in an abandoned tunnel. She was shot in the shoulder and barely escaped with her life. For the first time, the widow's hand bled. She went dark for 3 months. No leaks, no threats, no killings. The blacklist scattered, unsure if she'd been captured or killed. Marcus sat silently in his cell, staring at the wall, murmuring Yvette's name under his breath like a prayer for protection. And Maya Barris, she refused to stop digging, even when her apartment was broken into, even when her phone was cloned. Even when a man in a black SUV followed her to her mother's house. She knew the story was bigger than Ayana now. It wasn't about one woman's grief anymore. It was a reckoning. Then came the broadcast. It aired on an untraceable livestream, hijacked the feeds of 5 major news networks. 38 minutes long. Ayana, sitting in shadow, her shoulder bandaged, her voice steady. She laid all out. The drug trials, the silenced patients, the military contracts, the forged safety data. She named names, shared documents, played voicemails, displayed photos of children who died from unapproved medications, elderly victims sedated without consent in private nursing homes. At the end, she stared directly into the camera. I didn't start this fire. I just refused to let it go out. She stood. The camera panned down to a plaque nailed into the floor beneath her feet. It read, "This was Yvette's living room. She died waiting for help. Now we help ourselves." Then the screen went black. The government scrambled. A task force was formed overnight, but public opinion had already shifted. Protests erupted outside the companies exposed in Ayana's video. CEOs were called before Congress. Stock prices plummeted, and someone else began leaking new names. Not just Ayana. The blacklist had gone autonomous. Back inside Clearwater Correctional, Marcus received a letter. It had no postage, no return address, just a drawing done in charcoal. It was Yvette, smiling, behind her flames, and in front of her, Ayana's silhouette. On the back of the drawing, 2 words. It continues. Marcus closed his eyes and smiled, but one final twist remained. The 15th and final name on Ayana's original list. It had been redacted in every copy, blurred out, never leaked. Even Maya didn't know it until the day she received a plain white envelope. Inside, a birth certificate, a sealed family court record, and a photo of a woman in a military uniform holding a baby. The name beneath the photo, Yvette Lynn Talley, Classified Guardian Program, 1984. Maya's breath caught. She flipped the page and saw the final name, handwritten, Harlan Vance. Stephen Vance's son, the final name, and the father of Yvette's child. It was always about the silence. The way they buried Yvette Talley wasn't with dirt. It was with erasure. They scrubbed her name from records, twisted the narrative, told the world she was just another domestic call gone wrong. But the truth was louder than any headline they printed. And now the truth had a name. Harlan Vance, Yvette's son, hidden, protected, classified under a federal program, so deep it didn't officially exist. Not a casualty of injustice, but a weapon born from it. Maya Barris stared at the birth certificate for hours. She had cross-referenced everything. The photo, the timeline, the court seals. Harlan Vance had been placed in a military guardian program at just 6 months old, sealed away under a different name, raised on a private base in Montana. No record of adoption, no known relatives, no trace of Yvette's connection to him, except for the redacted document now in her hands. And one chilling fact, Stephen Vance had raised him, the same man Ayana had taken down in Part 3, which meant that Yvette's son had grown up believing her death was an accident, or worse, that it didn't matter. 2 weeks later, Harlan surfaced, not with violence, not with threats, but with an open letter. It was uploaded to every major platform, verified with facial ID, timestamps, and a badge, an elite military insignia known only to deep intel circles. My name is Harlan Vance. I was born Harlan Talley. I have lived my entire life believing a lie. My mother, Yvette, was murdered by a system that pretended to serve and protect. And my father, Stephen Vance, helped build that system. Today, I renounce him, and I stand with the blacklist. The video went viral in under 5 minutes. Harlan became the missing piece. He knew the corridors of government Ayana had never reached. He had the clearance, the access, the training. But more than that, he had a reason now. Because this wasn't just revenge for Yvette anymore. It was about reclaiming her legacy, and his own. He joined Ayana's operation, not as a symbol, but as a scalpel. Together, they launched what they called Operation Echo. A full-scale exposure of every official, agency, and corporate partner who benefited from the programs that erased people like Yvette. And the first name on the list, a retired senator named Douglas Fenn. Fenn had drafted legislation that expanded qualified immunity protections, laws that allowed officers to evade accountability even when wrongdoing was proven. But what few knew, he was also a silent investor in a for-profit prison conglomerate. Ayanna leaked the documents. Harlan leaked the offshore accounts. And Maya Barris, she stood on the steps of Fenn's home, microphone in hand, broadcasting live as protesters flooded the street. Fenn resigned within 24 hours. 2 days later, he was indicted on charges of racketeering and obstruction. It became a domino effect. One by one, the institutions fell. Payouts were frozen. Former victims came forward. The blacklist tripled in size. Ayanna and Harlan led the movement, not as fugitives, but as forces of truth. They didn't hide anymore. They had already lost everything that made hiding necessary. And yet, for every system dismantled, there remained one final wall untouched: the U.S. Department of Justice. Because buried in their archives, buried beneath layers of clearance, red tape, and secrecy, was the original memorandum that started it all. A memo signed in 1997, outlining the Urban Stability Directive, a federal policy that enabled localized suppression of minority-led complaints against law enforcement. It offered incentives to districts that kept their incident rates low by any means necessary. Clearwater PD had been one of the pilot programs. And Yvette Talley, she was never a random victim. She was the risk they couldn't afford. Ayanna knew what exposing that memo would mean. It would shake the entire country, and it would put every single member of the blacklist in the crosshairs. But she didn't hesitate. She went straight to the source. Washington, D.C. Federal Archives Building. 3:17 a.m. Ayanna and Harlan entered through the loading dock. Credentials cloned. Security looped. Room 401B cold. Dusty. Forgotten. They opened the drawer. Inside, a single folder. Stamped classified. Do not release. Ayanna hesitated. Harlan touched her shoulder. This is what she died for. She opened it. The memo was worse than they imagined. It described strategies for community containment. Listed key phrases to label victims: non-compliant, belligerent, domestic disturbance. It even provided a payout table, estimating how much cheaper settlements were than actual accountability. It was genocide with a spreadsheet. Ayanna scanned every page. Harlan uploaded the files to 3 satellite servers. And just as they prepared to leave, the alarm triggered. They'd been tracked. It wasn't a SWAT team that came for them. It was a private Black Ops unit. No insignia, no names. Kill orders. They made it to the stairwell. Shots fired. Harlan was hit in the leg. Ayanna dragged him down 2 flights, using a broken mop handle as a splint. They made it to the street. A car skidded to a halt. Maya Barris behind the wheel. She'd been watching the satellite logs in real time. They didn't look back. By dawn, the memo was live. Every page, every paragraph. Dozens of media outlets broke embargoes. Lawmakers scrambled to respond. But it was too late. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a movement. Marcus Talley, still in prison, was visited by a panel of federal officials. They handed him a document, a full pardon. He stared at the paper for a long time. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "No," the official said quietly, "but you earned it." A week later, Marcus stood on the steps of the Capitol, beside Ayanna, Harlan, and Maya. Thousands gathered in silence. He didn't shout. He didn't preach. He simply said, "This is what love looks like when it's denied justice." What happened to Yvette Talley didn't begin with a gun. It began with silence. The silence of the dispatcher, who didn't escalate the call. The silence of the officers who chose protocol over humanity. The silence of the department that erased her death. But what shattered that silence was not just rage. It was truth. Relentless. Tireless. Undeniable. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about the danger of letting systems decide who matters and who doesn't. It's about the price of apathy and the power of one person refusing to forget. In a world where injustice is often hidden behind policy, paperwork, and power, let this story be a reminder. Every name matters. Every voice counts. And silence only protects the guilty. So speak. Fight. Resist. Because justice delayed is still worth chasing. If this story moved you, don't stay silent. Comment below. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Like this video so more people see it. Share it with someone who needs to hear the truth. And subscribe for more true crime stories that expose the shadows and honor the names too often forgotten. Because the next story, it could be yours. And when it is, may the world refuse to stay silent.